evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater, the largest single-screen drive-in in the United States. We're certainly glad you could be with us this evening, and don't forget the concession stand is open with all kinds of great things to eat and drink.
.3 Mahoning Drive-In Radio. Your old friend Virgil back once again for another exciting episode of the podcast. As you guys all know, the only podcast dedicated to the revival of our beloved drive-in culture. And today we got all three hosts with us. We got Mark, General Manager Extraordinaire. Say hi, Mark.
Hi, I'm Extraordinaire.
And of course, we have the main man, the king of the drive-in, Jeff in the house. Say hi, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
And we had a very fun, why don't we say, kind of, we'll timestamp it. We're in the off season now. We just started announcing a couple of shows and people are getting incredibly excited, but we're certainly feeling it now as far as getting closer. Where are we at right now, Jeff? We 3 down? What, 2 left? Where are we at?
We're almost 4 down, 2 left.
4 down.
In about another 2 weeks. It'll be 4 down and 2 to go.
I'll tell you, it's coming. And we got a lot of stuff stirring in the pot. We always say it, if you guys want to follow us along, this is a great place to get the dish. But the social medias, we're just going to start blasting these events out pretty much every other day. So very excited about that. But also excited because Jeff just had a recent acquisition. And we're blessed sometimes that these collections will come out of the woodwork and kind of find us. Why don't you tell us the circumstances of your recent acquisition, Jeff?
Well, I think you and Mark know most of the story. We got just like we often do, we got an email from one of our fans, so to speak, and said that her mother's father had passed away.
Right.
And this girl's name was Jessica. Her mother's name was Lisa. Lisa's dad passed away. Jessica put me in touch with her mother, and her mother said that her dad used to be a projectionist. I didn't get any details yet, like where or anything, but he had been collecting films for years.
Right.
And he had his own basement screening room. He had a 35 millimeter projector set up, and then he threw it, across the basement to his screen. Yeah. And he had theater seats bolted into the floor. He had his own little screening room. Yeah, he had his own little screening room. So he collected all these 35 and 16 millimeter films, but he passed away last August while we were like in the middle of our season. He passed away. And she was sitting on this stuff for months and didn't know what to do with it. So I guess from her daughter, Jessica, she found out who we were and said, well, Jessica, email these guys, tell them we've got all this film. We don't know what to do with it. It's heavy. We took a couple prints out of the house and then decided we weren't going to move the rest of it because it was too much.
Right.
So I got in touch. Jessica got in touch with us. I got in touch with her mother, Lisa, and they invited me up to see this collection. So I went up last Sunday. And it's way up north. It's in Glen Lyon, Pennsylvania.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's in that region, Glen Lyon. So I went up there. And everything was ice up there because they got hit hard up there, not like we did. They got hit hard. Everything was ice. I had to use an ice chopper in order to get into the house because the house is on a hill. And if you just tried to, you just slide down the hill. You couldn't get into the house. So we had to use an ice chopper to get up the hill, into the house. And let me tell you, the basement was full of 35 millimeter film and 16 millimeter and projectors. Stuff all over the place. And as soon as I saw him, I knew this guy took care of his equipment because not only did the projectors look in great condition, but the films all had the paper bands on them from the studios.
Wow.
And I was looking at some of the titles and I started writing them down because I just wanted to have an idea of what we were getting. But there are, I won't say any titles because I don't want to ruin it for the folks when we run them, but there were 31 different prints that I could see. There were 31 different ones, and I wrote all those down, and I negotiated for them, and they didn't want that much for the whole lot, so I just bought everything. I just bought the whole thing. So we've got at least 31 new prints to add to our collection.
That's
so I'd say
amazing.
so we got to be up to like 40, a little over 40 now, maybe. with everything.
It really, yeah, for sure. We're probably topping at 50. The back room, is pretty much filled with a lot of the 35 millimeter, and now the vault is being born.
I don't know if we've talked about that collection either. The what I always refer to as our grindhouse prints. I don't know if on the podcast, Jeff, you've discussed those and how we got them and what the history of those prints were. This is what we usually use to fill out our Patreon Simply.
That was a
members
fun
only
trip. And I think actually Al shot when I went down to Jeff made the deal, but when I went down to pick them up, I think Al shot footage of that trip because there's some of it was used in the documentary. But I remember I guess why don't we say something like this happening? It almost takes our love and preservation of 35 millimeter and what we stand for. It takes it to the next level. Like in a weird way, Jeff went and climbed a mountain, literally of ice.
Yeah.
All I can think is The Price is Right. The mountain climber game and The Price is Right, where he has that. You weren't yodeling on the way up, were you?
No. Yeah.
Instead of falling off the end, you just slip and slide all the way back down the hill.
Yeah, that's about it. That's about it.
And that feeling is certainly what it felt like when we acquired that first batch of prints, which if we go back and Al was filming it would have been 2016. It would have been 2016 or 17, which is crazy. But yeah, Jeff, why don't you tell them the circumstances with that one, and then I'll get into kind of the trip.
Circumstances behind that one was that this girl contacted us. I believe she sent us an email and said that she'd like to go around and show like movies in the park, things like that. She had portable projectors, but she had films that she never used because she wasn't really into horror films.
Yeah,
I was going to say those are not movies you show in the park.
That's true, but that's why she said, well, she didn't use them because she had gotten them, and I'll get to that in a second where she got them from, but she had gotten a hold of them, and after she ran a few, she realized she really couldn't use them for what she was doing. So she contacted us and asked me if I wanted them, and I said, well, how many were there? And she told me at the time, I forget now, I guess there's about 8 different ones, maybe 10, something like that.
Yeah.
And she said they should all be in good shape. She said, I didn't play most of them, she said, but I got them from, another projectionist, and they've just been sitting here. So I negotiated. I said, okay, well, what do you want for them? And we batted that back and forth a couple of times. And I said, okay. I said, I'll take them. So here I find out later on, and Virgil can tell you about the trip down to get them because he went for them. But here I find out that she got them from a guy named Mike. And I said, you don't mean Mike Danchek by any chance, do you? And she said, yeah. She said, do you know him? I said, yes. I said, he had the drive-in before I had it. And I was his projectionist and manager. And he owns the Angela Theater in Coaldale. Yeah. And she said, well, that's where I got them from. They were stored at the Angela Theater.
What a small world, Yeah,
exactly.
The fact that these prints probably lived at the Mahoning at one point.
They could have been there at one point, but they were all up at the Angela, and she bought them from Mike because he didn't want them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she didn't realize they were horror or what, but then she couldn't use them, so we wound up with them.
Yeah.
So you can tell them about the trip down to get them, and just let me say, we're still going through them. My assistant projectionist, Robert, was supposed to take them all home over the winter and see which ones were still runnable, because we know at least one of them is not.
Yeah.
But so far, we've had some pretty good luck. I think all the rest that he's checked out are runnable. So if only one of them turns out no good, then that was a pretty good deal. But he should be all through them by now, I would think. And we'll find out which ones we can use. But tell him about the trip, Virgil.
Oh, yeah. And for the entertainment value we've gotten out of them alone, it was certainly worth it.
Right.
Well, definitely when this all came about, like I said, 2016, 17, Al probably was 17. He was doing pickup shots for the documentary, finishing things up. And from what I remember, the prints were down in Philly, and we had to go down in the Philadelphia area.
Yes.
And we made the trip, and it was great. We chatted the whole way down, and some of that footage made its way into the documentary. We talked about what's so special about the Mahoning and why people love to have their film screened at the Mahoning and blah, blah, blah. But as we start heading deeper into the city, and, remind you, I used to do some delivery jobs, things like that, have been all over the place. I'm just not a city guy. So it takes us a little while to find the parking and get situated on the one-way streets and blah, blah, blah. And finally, we pull up to what looks like an abandoned kind of brick building. And I'm like, there's no way this could be it, fenced off outside brick building. And I call the number that Jeff gave me. And, a woman picks up. It's like, oh, I'll be there in a little bit. And I'm expecting her to come down from the building, and she comes from behind me, behind us. And, I remember Al talking to her and saying, are you okay with us, shooting, going into this building? And she was so, do whatever you want to. Let's get this film out of here.
Yeah.
But I remember I brought one hand truck with me because at the time I was working at the vineyard and I had the hand truck and I thought, oh, I'll be fine. Anybody who knows film cans, these things, they don't stack easily in any way. There's no way to physically stack them easily. So we make our way down into, again, a building that turns out is abandoned, and make our way down to the basement. And it's getting damper and damper as we go down. I'm like, oh, what are these prints going to look like? And you remember, Jeff, and you've seen them, Mark, the cans, when I finally laid eyes on them, the cans were rusty, beaten up.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, oh my goodness. But I remember I cracked one open and it had a little bit of that vinegar smell. It looks like they had been down there and that place just possibly got water.
Yeah.
But I was like, all right, let's do this. And it was fun because Al was there and, we got to kind of take him through, and the audience, I guess, through the process of a rescue, which we kept talking about, the idea of what we're finding might be the only existing print of something.
Yes.
But unless we take that step to, GPS it an hour and 20 minutes out of the way into an unknown location, into an abandoned building's basement, which, sounds like the beginning of a horror movie we'd play. But if you're not willing to do that, that's how these prints get lost and, end up going in a dumpster somewhere and getting crushed. But
yes,
the haul out, poor Al. Of course, he came down to to film the documentary, and after 3 or 4 tries of trying to haul out what was probably 25 cans of film, all the way upstairs, out to the city parking, into the van. It was an endeavor, and my man, he stepped up, he helped us out. And the poor woman helped us out as well. She felt bad, I think, after a while. She's like, oh no, he's got this hand truck and thinks he's going to take all of these things. Yeah. But it ended up being a gold mine, like we said, and talking to Harry about that collection as well. It seems like they all came from the same era, kind of the grindhouse circuit of prints. Yeah. And for the Mahoning, I mean, that's exactly the type of stuff that we want, even though we can play whatever we want at this point. There's different means for us to tap different audiences, but that's our bread and butter. So for us to have a couple of these key titles literally in the vault, in the back room vault, it's a beautiful thing. But that's a great memory. And I wonder if any of that's on the disc, the DVD special features.
I don't think any of that's on the special features.
No. Well, I guess we'll have to wait for the 10th or 20th anniversary.
The Redux, where he makes it an hour longer.
The remake.
Yeah. But yeah, that was a lot of fun.
We have lunch with these French people upriver, and we pick up a lot of film cans.
Right.
What's interesting about the haul, this most recent haul from this person's house, is that the films are not, for the most part, horror and cult titles. They're much more mainstream genres of decades past. They're much older titles than we have. So.
Yeah, you could tell they were probably films he loved,
Oh yeah. He clearly was into like Westerns and old action movies and adventure films. So it's the kind of thing we don't play a lot of. It's very likely the studios may not have copies of a lot of these films because some of them are pretty obscure, but I think we'll find a way to make use of them, be they secret Patreon screenings or free community nights or something like that. And there's a couple titles in there that are like stone cold classics that when Jeff read the list, both Virgil and I gasped or yelped.
Yeah. And what I'm thinking is if some of these prints, we might be able to help our driving a little bit by loaning some of these out to others for a fee, of course. But
I mean, that's the great thing. It's a circuit.
Oh yeah, exactly. It works both ways. Yeah, we have to loan prints from people too and pay for them, so it works both ways. But what I forgot to mention is there's also a couple reels full of cartoons.
Ooh, gold.
Yep, couple 35 millimeter reels of cartoons, couple of news reels, 35 millimeter news reels from the past. There's some trailers. Don't know. I didn't see those. They're in the. They had some of the stuff boxed up already.
I saw the photo that they sent over of and you could tell the guy clearly was a lover of film. He had the rack set up. He had, the whole setup. So I remember peeking at a couple of the tapes, and there's some good titles on those trailers.
Yeah, and we can have the racks too if we want them. We can have the
Come on.
Yeah, we can have the racks too.
Yeah, think about how beautiful that is,
Yeah, and there are a couple of cans that were closed that I didn't open, but there are a couple cans labeled nitrate. Now those are really old. Yeah. I don't know what's in them, but they're old.
Oh my goodness.
Old and dangerous.
Yeah, which is why we must be very careful with them.
I've always wanted to see nitrate film because I'm told it has a very unique look to it that film that came after does not have.
Right. The darks are really dark. I mean, the blacks are really like solid. I mean, it's just the contrast is fantastic. And if they're in the same shape as the ones that he has on the racks, but they've got to be pretty old. I can't wait to run them and find out what they are. But there's a couple cans of nitrate too.
I have this fear. I don't know if you guys have this fear as well, but I always worry something's going to happen to me and my collection that means so much to me. And when I say collection, I mean my records, my DVD and Blu-ray collection, my things.
Yeah, don't forget your t-shirts.
Of course, my coveted t-shirt, which Nancy loves. I worry, this stuff is going to go lost. It's going to get donated to a thrift store or something like that. And it's something that a person I truly loved. And the idea that, Jeff walked into this guy's house after he passed away, somebody who also is somebody who appreciates film as much as he did and does, it's kind of crazy. I think that's a beautiful element to this whole thing as well, because it's not the first time that somebody has reached out or walked into the booth and said, I stumbled upon these, I came upon these because so and so passed away, and they get to tell us their story, and it almost passes on their legacy in a weird way, their love and fandom in a weird way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Hopefully you guys will be able to see some of this stuff on the big screen. We like to share a lot of videos and things like that to the Patreon and social medias, and this for sure will be great, digging through these boxes of trailers and bringing all this stuff home and finding a place for it.
Absolutely. It's going to be fantastic. And my idea, of course, is to get all of these located in one place, not too far from the drive-in, that we can go down, give somebody the key, go down, pick up what we need and bring it back. And we're going to put, I know Robert took some home with him to clean out the back room a little bit, but all the stuff in the back room, all the stuff that Robert has, all the stuff that I still have, it's all going to be in one place.
Oh, that'll be great.
And yeah, it's all going to be in one place. And we're going to be able to go down, pick out anything we want and bring it back.
That's awesome.
A great new motion picture in the world's newest motion picture process, Cinemagic. The wonder of the added fourth dimension. With Cinemagic, you are actually on the first rocket ride to Mars in the Angry Red Planet. You feel the dizzying heights of their fantastic city of mile-high buildings. You'll shiver as you ride the River of the Dead. Your depth perception will increase 1,000-fold as you look into the waters that lead to foreverness. And the terrors you meet on Mars are beyond man's imagination. The Rat-Bat Spider. So real in Cinemagic, you'll feel the crazed stare of its blinded eyes, the tearing shock of its iron claws, the giant amoeba, Like an Earth germ only 100 million times larger. Thrills, shocks, terrors, and your first glimpse of the life and the world of Mars. All are yours to experience in The Angry Red Planet in Eastman 5250 color from American International.
Well, why don't we, I know the last time we left off last episode, we were starting to hit some fan questions. I take it, Mark, you still got some of those?
Oh, we have. Every time we put it out to our Patreon, folks, give us some questions or some topics to work from. They deliver like FedEx in the old days. They got jets, they got trucks, they use rail, the occasional telegram. No, they deliver these amazing, thoughtful, thought-provoking questions. Yeah. So I've got a bunch of those that we received. There's one we wanted to save because Virgil and I talked about it, but we thought Jeff should weigh in.
Yes.
And then a bunch that have come into our possession after we recorded the Patreon only show. So for the answers for the first 2 or 3, you have to be a Patreon member to hear those. But now the public will hear the rest of this.
I remember now, my mind is going back, which always isn't the best and sharpest at times, but I'm remembering what that question was that we wanted to get Jeff involved in. So whenever we can get Jeff on the pod, it's great to jump into these things. Now, from what I'm remembering, this question had to do with women in movies that took our fancy growing up. Am I remembering correctly? Maybe you should read the question.
I'll read it. That's the way it was presented to us because, we're straight dudes. It's going to be women. But if we had a more varied number of people with us, it could be something else. But Jean Beretta asks, sex, lies, and 35 millimeter, romance below the screen, stories about couples in their cars, outside their cars, naughty behavior that had to be stopped, best films to promote that behavior. Which sex symbol would you have as a guest at the Mahoning? Your biggest crushes in different film categories, horror, drama, comedy. So the first part of this is spotlight on Mr. Maddox. Do you have stories about randy behavior at drive-ins you've worked at?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I'm sure it's endless. It's when we were talking about Gene's stories, that's the ones he'd always love to tell.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I was running the highway drive-in in Limerick, Pennsylvania. I did that in 86 and 87. So don't remember if it was 86 or 87, but I was closing up one night, middle of the summer, and there's one car left on the field. And unlike us, back then, you couldn't have people staying overnight. As a matter of fact, my company that I worked for specifically told us, you make sure that field is clear of everybody before you go home. Right. So great. So I'm closing up one night. There's one car left. And I thought, they fell asleep because that happens now and then. So I took my flashlight because, it's pitch dark. I went out to the car, tapped on the window, and to put it in nice words, there's a couple going at it in the back seat. She's on top of him. And I knock on the window, and she turns and looks at me over her shoulder and says, "We'll be done in a minute." and then just went right back to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very polite.
Dedication, Holmes. We came to the drive-in for a reason, sir. We're almost done.
Right. But that's what she said. "We'll be done in a minute." And
wow, that's classic. That's one for the book. What's it like to run a drive-in? Well, be prepared for things like this.
Exactly.
I told them a story or two of hearing things, but I've never witnessed. James told a story of walking up on somebody in the Jason costume and he walked up on somebody trying to scare them in the car, and they were going at it. I said, "Oh my gosh, they're going to tell that story forever." The best bar story I ever heard. Yeah, we went to the drive-in, and guess who shows up? At the window.
Oh, yes.
That's
Give couples a chance. There's that kind of thing that goes on. I mean,
Part of the drive-in culture. I think I said it on the Patreon podcast, too. Whenever we have the celebrity guests or guests in general, I have a habit of saying, "What's your experience at the drive-in or with the drive-in?" And they all give a look like, "Should I say? What do you mean by experience?" It's like the mind automatically goes there.
So Gene asked, what are the best films to promote that behavior? So I don't know that it really matters. I think if spring is in the air, so to speak, or there's springs in the
we were
backseat.
playing Friday the 13th movies and, whatever floats your boat, I guess. But I remember we said the Russ Meyer movies that kind of have that vixen-y sex appeal. I mean, that's what I think of personally.
I would have thought, like 80s teen sex comedies, like in those days, that's where everybody's mind is at, and you're going to watch.
That's true.
Put thought.
It's like, how many sex scenes can we jam?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a big part of it. But you could really run anything, and there's still going to be that kind of stuff going on.
Yeah. It happens. Part of the culture, baby.
One of my favorite stories that Bill, whose father built the drive-in, the original owner, he tells some stories. We'll get him on eventually to maybe tell the story I'm referring to, but there is a great story that happened at the Mahoning involving salacious behavior during Toy Story 3. It really doesn't matter what the movie is.
You got to pick and choose your spots, people.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
is this story not at ground level?
This is an elevated story.
Yes, I've heard.
Okay.
I've heard this story.
What I was thinking of. Okay. All right.
Yeah, Bill has a couple good ones.
One day we will tell that story, but perhaps not today. So also, Gene is asking, which sex symbol would you have as a guest at the Mahoning?
We talk about it all the time, Jeff. Elvira. I mean, that's one that is perfect for the Mahoning. Yeah. And whether or not she presents herself as the sex symbol, I mean, come on, she's Elvira.
Exactly. And another one, because I fell in love all over again when I saw the new Spider-Man movie, Marissa Tomei.
Wow, right? She's
I don't care. And she looked great. She's 57 years old, and she looked fantastic.
Yeah.
She looked
That's a big play in those Spider-Man movies. It's like, hey, Aunt May is looking good.
Well, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about the previous incarnations. You had an elderly woman in the Tobey Maguires. You had Sally Field in the Andrew Garfield's, and then you have Marissa Tomei. And there was some meme going around that, the next Spider-Man, she's going to be like a teenager or the same age. It's just younger and younger and younger. But she's great. She's been great in things since I remember her on afternoon soap operas in the 80s. She's been around for a long time.
She's
some
incredible.
People just don't seem to age. Some people, male and female, have work done to stay looking young, but some people, it's just crazy when you hear how old they are. It just doesn't. It's like they're sleeping in formaldehyde, or they've got a painting in the attic or something.
And you can tell she's older, but she still looks fantastic.
So the next question, part of this question, is your biggest crushes in different film categories. I don't know if we got that specific. I couldn't really think of anybody per se when we were talking the last time. He said, horror, drama, comedy, whatever.
I said, for me, my first love, because my father was obsessed with her, was Anne Margaret. He used to watch Anne Margaret movies just for Anne Margaret, and that became very impressionable on me early, to be like, oh, well, that's a beautiful woman, And she was one that still to this day, Anne Margaret's name pops up in a credit, I flutter a little.
Yeah.
That's a heart murmur, and you should get that checked out.
I can remember a couple from when I was a kid, so I go back a few more years than you guys do, but I think you'll know the names. But when I was a kid, girls that I thought just were absolutely gorgeous. Of course, they were all on TV. I mean, films and TV shows. Back then, of course, you had NBC present Sunday Night at the Movies and all this, you had all that stuff back then. But my early crushes were, Anne Francis, Julie Newmar, Lee Merriweather, Ann Baxter. Oh my goodness. Stephanie Powers and Inger Stevens. I had crushes on all those girls when I was a kid. I thought they were just gorgeous. And
I believe, without giving anything away, we are intending to show a film that features one of those ladies this coming season.
That's true.
Great, fantastic.
Yeah, we've been so lucky with the guests, and the idea of bringing some of these stars, huge kind of symbols at the time, bringing them out to see their fans, that would be super cool, super fun.
And we've done a little of that. I mean, we had Linnea Quigley come out to the theater, who for a generation was this, major crush screen.
I watched men melt at that table. It was great.
I watched staff members melt.
Being at the DJ booth, you know it. You get that great view, and a guest is right outside of the booth. But it's crazy. We watched some of our staff melt, by the way.
Yeah.
I remember Tony came in and was just like, "Where's Linnea?"
Yeah. He still talks about her at the radio station. I'm telling
you, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you're impressionable as a kid and you see these people larger than life up on the big screen, it's so impressionable on you, and you become obsessed sometimes. I certainly recall some of those instances where you just kind of become fixated on a person. I brought up, Jeff, I don't know if you remember this show, but MTV used to have a show called Singled Out, and one of the hosts was Jenny McCarthy, who was, I think she's hosting something now. But I remember I was probably way too young to have a poster of a woman scantily clad on a bed, literally on my wall, just bang. And for whatever reason, my parents were just like, all right, I'm going to encourage this.
That was such a, I think Farrah Fawcett really kicked that off.
The wall women,
and then it seemed like 70s, 80s, that was a big thing. But I feel like at some point that dropped off, the whole saucy lady poster on your wall. That's something my parents
I bought it at a Walmart or at Sears.
Yeah, I remember going to the Kmart, or in my area, it was an Ames department store, and they had that the metal frames that you would flip through. Usually they were near the music section or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. What a different time. Right?
But we've had male and female celebrities out at the drive-in now that people are just gaga over. I mean, Noah Hathaway, Atreyu last year, you had an endless line of people who are just googly-eyed and slack-jawed that he was there. Zach Galligan. I mean, it really goes both ways. We're an equal opportunity crush provider.
Theater for sure.
Yeah.
Nance talks about that all the time. She had an amazing one-on-one interaction with Noah. I think he just knows, people eat him up, and a lot of these guests, they really know how to, what I say, play the table, where they give the fans what they kind of want. We've been really lucky to not have anybody that was like, throw the pinky up, I'm too Hollywood for this, whatever. And we've had Bruce Campbell, we've had Tom Savini, we've had, Bill Moseley, huge stars.
Yep.
And we're just really lucky, I think, that the people that we align ourselves with are really into what we do, And certainly if they're on the fence after the event, they are really into what we do. So it's really cool to be able to add more and more big names to the Mahoning family every season. And we're working on some good ones for this year too. So, well, what other dirty questions does Gene took us on a total right turn of
and as I pointed out the last time, this is children's book author and illustrator. Muppet adjacent.
Gene, you
friend of the family.
Hello there. Here's the demonstration of my new invention, the goodies machine. The machine turns out delicious hot doggies one after the other. And thirst-quenching sodas also. Gives popcorn of the most tasty kind, plain unbuttered. Candy too, crunchy and dandy. Steaming hot coffee and ice cream too. These goodies are at a snack bar just waiting for you.
So up next, our good friend John Dahl asks this musical question: favorite these people had so much filming this movies that you just seemed like they were a blast to make. Somebody actually had commented on that, and they suggested Animal House, Blues Brothers, Caddyshack, or anything
movies that seem like they had a blast making.
Yeah, and he said, or anything that has Burt Reynolds and Hal Needham in the credits, which is what I would say. Cannonball Run was mine. And that was one of the criticisms of that movie when it came out and through the years, is it's just it's a bunch of people just goofing off, having a good time. I'm like, yes, it's people goofing off and having a good time. And I actually, speaking of crushes, when I met Adrienne Barbeau at a convention years ago, I'm a huge Cannonball fan, if I haven't mentioned it. And I asked her about it, and I said, it looks like it was just the most fun to make. And she said, yeah, it was a really good time. So the Smokey and the Bandit, and two of my favorite movies are that. They're movies that people just are having a blast. Detroit Rock City looks like it was a blast to make. Do you guys have any movies like that you just, part of the reason you love to watch them is because you wish you could have been there when they made it?
Yes. I call them hangout movies where you
Judgment at Nuremberg.
It's a great one.
The Pawnbroker is the one I always go to for that.
12 Angry Men. It's, you want to go and have a great time. But no, yeah, I call them hangout movies where when you watch them, you feel like you are hanging out with old friends, visiting old friends. And a lot of movies were really impressionable on me in middle school, but especially high school, when I really started thinking about film as a craft, but I would rewatch Dazed and Confused over and over again because they felt like characters that I was experiencing at school, just like in a different era. Certainly Clerks, any of the Kevin Smith movies. I think the reason I love Kevin Smith movies is because I started getting into, when I was running the video store, the commentary aspect of things. And he really took you down this path of like, I'm making movies with my friends. And once you start knowing that, it becomes more and more fun to get down with that. But gosh, yeah, there's so many, but those are certainly two that come to mind.
Yeah, a movie for me that I always thought was a blast to make, The Hateful Eight. No, I'm just kidding.
Everyone like so focused on their character.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you one that I thought was a blast to make was probably The Money Pit.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
That is
I'll
a
bet
great
they
one.
had a blast making that. Yeah,
People where they have that chemistry, you know what I mean, and it pops off the screen. A lot of comedies are really good with that. I think the Judd Apatow movies are really good with that. The earlier ones are really good with that, with having it feel like you're hanging out with buddies and they're kind of snapping quick off the top.
Right.
That's funny because I think about high school movies like Breakfast Club. They seem like they are friends that they turned a camera on. Fast Times at Ridgemont High feels like that is a functioning high school that somebody walked in with a camera,
Yeah.
The set I always wished I could take a time machine and find a way on is Almost Famous. I love that movie so much. It's an era of rock and roll and kind of America that I would just love to kind of be a fly on the wall there with the filming of that movie. The more times I watch it, it becomes better and better to me. How about you, Mark? Obviously, the Burt Reynolds stuff. I'm trying to think of stuff that has the gag reels at the end, where you can literally see them cracking up.
Yeah, for me, it's probably that trinity, the Burt Hal trinity of Hooper, Smokey, chronologically, Smokey and the Bandit, Hooper, and Cannonball Run, the first of each of those movies. It just looks, they were good old boys. They were good old boy movies, and people, knocking them back and having a good time. And those outtake reels really do show you that. I think the outtake reel for those guys started with Smokey 2, actually, a movie I don't really like, but then they did it in Cannonball. Most people remember that. But those are the ones that come immediately to mind, and everything else we've mentioned. See, the thing, a lot of times, the funniest movies, it takes a lot of hard work to make. So I was thinking into the Pink Panther movies I've been thinking about lately and how I love those. And I don't know if those are as much fun to make as they were to watch, but maybe something like Mad World, because that was, everybody in that cast was a comedian.
Yeah.
And I've heard tales of Jonathan Winters would sit in his trailer during the production of that and just entertain people between shots. Like somebody would throw him a hat and he'd do a character for 20 minutes until they were ready on the set again. So I imagine that one was probably quite a good time.
I mean, the Martin and Lewis stuff, think about how crazy that would have been, and how much fun it would have been to be in that madness. But I was thinking about with the Western stuff. I'm trying to dig into some more Western stuff over this week, and I watched Rio Bravo again. That movie.
Speaking of Dean Martin.
Yeah. Well, that's what made me think of it, because, that's another movie where you just feel like all these stars are at their pinnacle. Like you can't rock any of these boats. And that must have been a blast. But the Hangout movie, it's a great appeal for me. And when it works really well, I mean, I go right away again to the comedy stuff, like the Jim Carrey stuff. We've never played, I think, any. I don't know if we've ever played any Jim Carrey stuff, but there's a great gag reel at the end of Liar Liar. You guys ever
remember
see
that?
it?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's a great
I'm just
movie.
like, I want to see an hour of this.
Yeah, that's a great movie.
I think Used Cars would be another one too. Used Cars is hilarious. Everybody in it is hilarious, and it's such a off the wall, wild movie that I can't imagine it was totally boring when the camera was off.
That's a good one. And John Dahl, we love John. He's a regular at the Mahoning. He actually spun some records, I think, in the last month at the Mahoning.
He did a couple DJ sets, and he was good. Very, very amusing, eclectic, semi-wacky sets.
Yeah.
He created an amazing button that is available only to Simplex members at our screenings that refers to something we always play at our Simplex members only screenings. And he came up to me and he showed me, was like, would you be okay if I made some of these? I'm like, yeah, it's amazing. I want one. He
made the staff those patches too. Remember that?
Some amazing embroidered patches that he designed and had made for us. Yeah, John's a good guy.
Malamundo, the wide, wild, uninhibited world of restless, reckless youth. Malamundo, frenzied, frantic youth on the loose. The new generation looking for new kicks anywhere they can find them. Malamundo, the youth of Europe seen in the glaring spotlight of its own excesses. Raw, raucous, rowdy. From Bond Street to Bedlam. From Paris to Pandemonium. The good and the bad. The wild and the willing. This is Malamundo, a motion picture unlike any you've ever seen before. 2 years in the making by Europe's top camera crews. Hear the new song hit, Funny World, sung by Jane Morgan in Malamundo.
Up next, William Sebastian asks, movie-ish question. If you could have a beer with any actress or actor, living or dead, who would it be? Hang out and knock one back.
Living or dead? Oh my God, that's so hard.
I think it just boils down to who would you just like to hang out with for a little while?
Well, it's funny because we're now on Letterboxd. This isn't a push or an ad for Letterboxd, although I'm loving it. Jeff, if you don't know, Letterboxd is like a means to log the movies that you watch and have watched, and you can review them. It's kind of a social thing too. You create these accounts. Yeah, so you can see what your friends are watching as far as movie-wise, see what they think about movies. And
I use it as a way to just keep track of what I've seen.
Oh, it's great. That's my biggest issue is, trying to remember. And now with the theater, it's a great tool because you can create lists. And I started making lists of what we played over a season. So if you go on Letterboxd, there's a 2014 through 2020 now. Every single movie that played at the Mahoning in that season, you can just scan and see all the titles. And it's been really fun, but it's also been memory lane. But we haven't done it in, I think now 3 years if we don't do it this year. But those of you guys that know me, I'm a huge Kevin Smith guy. Without a doubt, the opportunity to bring Kevin to the theater, into the Mahoning fold, is something I've been dreaming of since day one, as Jeff will attest.
Didn't he say he thought he could make it this year, maybe?
We were so close. It was last year.
Oh.
Yeah, I talked with Malcolm Ingram, who is one of Kevin's good buddies, and he also is a documentarian and made the recent, actually, I just bought a copy the same day I bought Marionette Land. It came out the same day. Documentary about Kevin Smith called Clerk. And we were trying to bring Malcolm and Kevin out during the pandemic to do this big premiere screening, East Coast premiere screening of Clerk. And of course, in pure Mahoning fashion, we were going to try to make it like a big 3-day couple Kevin Smith movies and the premiere each night. And it was going great. And it was the pandemic more than anything that crushed it. But if you're a fan of the Mahoning, you know it. That's a no-brainer event or home for somebody to come and do what they do on the Mahoning lot. And since we've grown more and more over the years, it almost makes more sense now that, like the Joe Bob situation where he was actually able to present from a stage and, do the field show up front and all that stuff. There's elements now that we have in our pocket that would make that a lot easier. But I have to go to that for probably my number one living. God, that's so hard, dude. If I had like the choice and it had to be just one person, it would be like, I'd shake myself silly just being like, I can't pick it. But I'll think on the dead one. What about you guys?
It's funny because a lot of people who I like or I think I really enjoy their work, they may be a dud to talk to. Because
I also you don't want that bubble burst. You brought me back from the dead for this?
Exactly. Yeah. It's one of those things where I had always heard, going back to Pink Panther and Peter Sellers, who I love and loved growing up. People often said, if he wasn't doing a character, he really wasn't much of a person. Like, he didn't have his own identity. He only really came alive when he was being somebody else. So I think about dead people because it's less likely that would ever happen. So if I can have my wish, why not with somebody that's not possible to possibly? Well, think about the life we are living right now. Think about all the people we've met and hung out with at the theater.
True.
That was insanity if you told us that a decade ago. So
if you told us that 2 years ago.
Yeah. So like anybody who's alive, that's still a possibility as far as we're concerned. So I'm going to skip that. For me, it might be somebody like Burt Reynolds or somebody like Robert Mitchum, or somebody who has stories and a lot of panache.
Yeah.
Maybe Kurt Russell, a guy who's alive now, because if you listen to the commentaries he's on for the Carpenter movies, he's hilarious and super cool.
He seems like he's just such a gem.
Yeah. Somebody who's just, is a good conversationalist and has stories. So I guess those are the ones I would probably go with off the top of my head. I mean, as you guys talk, if I think of more, I'll jump in.
Both of my choices are dead, unfortunately. But I would say female, I would say Inger Stevens. And male, I would say Humphrey Bogart.
Oh, yeah.
You talk about stories. Oh.
Talk about a photo op at the Mahoning.
Yeah.
He's here in person. Bogey Fest.
My friend Ian runs the Somerville Theater in Boston. It's a beautiful old classic movie theater that also does live events. And they're doing a bogey series on 35, a couple of weekends, I think. And they're calling it Weekend at Bogies, which I thought was kind of
cool. So good.
Yeah.
And anytime I see anybody else running 35 and interesting titles, I always make note of it because it's like, okay, there's a print of that and there's a print of that.
That's another fun thing about Letterboxd too, is I'm not the only one who makes lists, and a lot of people put up there my personal 35 millimeter collection or the UCLA vault collection. People are doing real service to us and to the fans out there who sometimes it's a dig and it's a search, and to have a social network that really connects on a movie level, I'm loving it more and more. So, and again, they don't sponsor us. We're just, we're just truly liking it.
Well, the idea behind, I'm really kind of into growing our film collection now after this latest acquisition, because the more prints we get, the more we can trade instead of having to rent everything.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That's just from a business standpoint. Hey, we have a print of that. You want to borrow it? Sure. All right. Let us borrow something from you for nothing, And I mean, I think that's great. And we are bound to, if we keep growing our film collection, we're bound to get some stuff that is rare and hard to find. We might have some now already that are rare and hard to find.
Yeah.
In fact, one of those titles, which I won't mention, but one of those titles I read to you, Humphrey Bogart is in the movie.
Oh, I love it. Can't wait to dig. That's a great question. And those of you guys that want to get involved, again, if you're not on the Patreon, jump over to the Patreon and let us know. Who would you want to have dinner with?
And when we say living or dead, they would be alive when they had dinner with you. It's not like you'd get an urn would show up with the dinner. You would have a chance to,
Weekend at Bernie's style.
Yeah. Not that.
Yeah.
Here's the way we quench our thirst, quench our thirst, quench our thirst. Here's the way we quench our thirst. At the refreshment counter, now's the time to yum, 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 yum. Now's the time to yum, yum, yum. At the refreshment counter, popcorn, drinks, and candy too, candy too, candy too. Popcorn, drinks, and candy too. At the refreshment counter, at the refreshment counter, at the refreshment counter.
So up next, Rob Tillich asks this question. weird movie associations. I don't know if others do the same, but I'm more readily able to associate moments in my life with movies I've seen at that time. Dune equals walking our dog with my younger brother after seeing it, running up ahead of him and hiding in the bushes to scare him half a dozen times until deservedly getting my nose broken on the 7th go round by one of his wildly flailing, terrified limbs. You didn't even need to ask a question. That story alone is great. Born on the 4th of July, inexplicably equals making out with my girlfriend at the time, junior year, in the back of the theater. So what, I guess this is, what memories do you have associated around seeing a movie that aren't necessarily about sitting and looking at that movie?
I think we all do that. I think as just a person, you connect memories with music, with movies, with, you know, whatever the kind of media is happening at the time. Oh, man, so many. So it's strange because whenever I watch Fire in the Sky, which we've talked about on the podcast before, and how much that movie freaked me out the summer that I saw it on HBO, I get this sense memory of the summertime kind of air, you know? And we used to, I'm sure you guys had it too. We had the ice cream man come through all the time, you know, through the neighborhood.
We never had that where I grew up. I was always so jealous of people who had an ice cream truck.
That's crazy. It's like he would know when all the kids were at a certain house. He'd like stop there until we all came out of the house. But whenever I watch certain movies from my childhood, I used to always get a chip which if you guys know, it's the 2 cookies, ice cream, the chips around it. So good. Perfect treat. But I would get it every time during summer. And there was this long stretch where we would become obsessed as a group with movies, you know, that had just come out, whatever the case is. But to this day, whenever I watch Mighty Ducks, I start to fiend Chipwiches. Same thing happened to me when I watched Little Giants. I watched Little Giants with Virgie, and not too long ago, and I went on my 90s run. And same thing happened where I'm like, I want some ice cream, specifically Chipwich. But yeah, a lot of memories with movies and shows with relationships. I remember one of my first girlfriends in middle school and then going into high school. I used to go over to her house and watch Dawson's Creek, you know, because she liked it, whatever. Her parents would let me come over. And yeah, Dawson's Creek has a whole other like meaning into my memory.
That's pretty good. That's great.
Yeah, well, certain stuff, like I said, like certain stuff, it clicks with you, you know?
Yes.
Whenever I watch the opening titles to Never Say Never Again, the Connery Bond film from '83, the unofficial Bond film from '83.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that initially at the Claremont Drive-In in New Hampshire, where I grew up. And that was a drive-in screen that had the sort of, in the scheme of things, thin vertical strips of metal made up the screen.
Yep.
So occasionally you would see, if you were close enough or whatever, you would see the texture of those strips if it was a very white image. And the opening of that movie projected on that screen, the opening of that movie has vertical lines in it. That's like the look of the opening titles over the imagery that you see. So when I watch that opening title now, I still think about seeing it at the drive-in because it's sort of, the movie itself replicates occasionally the look of what a movie looked like there. So I always think about that. I remember, I'm just going to lapse into stories of what happened in or around the theater. So here's a little story. Back in 1980, I want to say, a movie was advertised heavily on TV called Earthbound. It's a movie that's been totally forgotten. It was produced by Sun Classics, which was a movie company that was known for Chariots of the Gods and a lot of those in search of kind of film documentaries, in search of historic Jesus and Chariots of the Gods and all kinds of other stuff. But they did a dramatic family-oriented film about this family in a UFO come in outer space, and they crash land on Earth, and they have to pretend to be Earth people. And Burl Ives is in it, and he helps them out. It had Christopher Connolly, who went on to be in some early '80s like Italian schlock movies like Raiders of Atlantis and stuff. And it's this family movie, plays like it's a TV movie. And it's this family trying to like fix their spaceship and go home before the authorities get them. Sort of like E.T., but they look like us, and it was a couple years before E.T. So it was coming out, and my mother was going to take me to go see it the opening weekend. So I'm in line for the bus in grade school, and I mentioned to a friend of mine that he can come with us because you need to go, your parents would take you and a friend to the movies. And then other kids are talking about it. And I proclaimed to all the kids in line, which is 3 or 4 or 5 kids, oh, my mother will take all of us. She'll pay. Don't worry about it. And then I got home that night and I informed my mother that I told 5 or 6 kids that she would be taking us all to the movies. And she was like, what?
Yeah.
How about you don't promise how many people I'm going to take? I mean, these were kids I was barely even friends with. I don't know. I was feeling generous that day. So we went to the movie. We took up most of a row. We watched it. We liked it. And then when we left, we found out that my friend's older sister who was with us had lost her comb. I guess she had a comb in her back pocket and she lost it. And apparently it was a very important comb. So they had to go back in and like look for the comb as the next show was playing. So like none of us could go home. We were hanging in the lobby of, this is the early 80s. So the theaters were busy. People went to see everything. And it was like a Friday night. So we sat there like through part of the 9 o'clock show while these kids went in to look for her comb amongst people who were sitting in their seats trying to watch a movie. So there's no real point to that story. There's no big laugh at the end of it. But I often think about that movie and the fact that we had to search for somebody's comb in the dark. And it's a movie that's like never hit home video as far as I know. It's kind of a lost film.
The old comb fiasco.
The old comb fiasco. I was just boring Val with that story just the other day.
She's looking at you right now like, you're not telling the comb story.
It isn't even a story.
Nah, that's great. And there's so many. We've talked about it over and over again. I feel like I love certain movies because I experienced them at a drive-in. And I had that moment of discussion with friends and family and whatever else. And you're impressionable as a kid, and all it takes is a cousin to say, that movie rocked, right? And you're like, yeah, it did.
I don't know if I've mentioned the Krull story. That's another one. So we were watching the movie Krull, which we probably should show someday. The movie Krull on HBO when it first hit HBO. And I was laying on the living room floor, just kind of casually watching this. And there's this scene where these like creatures or bad guy soldiers or whatever are marching through a swamp. It's very foggy. And somebody shoots one of them with this gun. And it's like what they used to do with like electricity, like animated electricity all over a person. So they get shot with it. And this creature is, enveloped in animated electricity, and they scream and fall over. And right as that electricity hit the creature, I got a foot cramp. And I'd never had a foot cramp before. So suddenly this creature is getting shocked and in pain, and I am feeling pain. And it was the split second where my mind is like, did something just come out of the TV and hurt me? Every time I think of Krull, I think of the first time I got a foot cramp.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Great.
Yeah, man, if I could rack my brain, there's so many. Like I said, I think that's a natural human thing to connect memories and movies, and it happens all the time on the lot where, I'll forget something happened. And while we're watching a movie that I haven't watched in sometimes 30 years, it'll bring back this whole like, oh my gosh, I remember walking the video store aisle and seeing this or grabbing this or whatever it is. That's, I think, nostalgia again. The fact that it can kind of rumble up at moments is another big appeal.
Save your battery and your disposition. When it rains, you can still enjoy the movie with a Drizzle Guard rain visor. Simply press suction cups to the windshield as shown in the detail on your instruction sheet. Drizzle Guards are on sale now at the concession stand.
Next, we have Zachariah Smith. Oh, he said my name in his question. On a podcast, Mark talked about seeing the opening scene from Prom Night on TV as a youth, and I had virtually the same experience. When you encounter someone who's had the same formative moment as you, does it make you feel good that you found a kindred spirit, or bad that your personal memory isn't as unique as you thought? I think it's cool that's what brings so many of us together.
Yeah.
The shared experience of seeing a movie in the theater together, or seeing a movie at the same time period, or back when, back in my day in school, you talk about what you watched on TV the night before. And with so many fewer channels and everybody watching everything live, chances were pretty good that the majority of people you would talk to saw the same thing you did. And that kind of brought you together. So yeah, I don't feel any less. I think it's very cool that he had the same experience I did with Prom Night. So I know it's not just me.
Yeah. And we talked about what we were talking about. I don't know how that came up. I guess because that was a TV movie that you were talking about?
It was the broadcast premiere of Prom Night on TV when I was a little kid. And I caught it, Home Alone, and it just freaked me out.
Yeah, I think honestly, the Mahoning was born on kind of coming together and all getting scared together, I feel like, we all share these stories and these moments, and especially the age range thing is big, where if a movie does a really good job, it scares the hell out of everybody. But sometimes, you remember movies that were really, really scary when you saw them as a kid or when you first saw them, and then they don't have that effect anymore or whatever. But I really get into it when you see somebody else as scarred as you are over a piece of film.
It doesn't have to be scary movies. It could be, we all cried at Titanic at the same time.
That's true too.
Or we all had a foot cramp during Crawl or something like that. It's just anything that we all can share.
I'm thinking about the story, like it was right when the podcast was starting, when we booked Travis Walton. And I kept saying, I'm facing my fears, guys. The movie that literally scarred me as a child and kept me from wanting to go out in the dark and all that stuff. And I have the guy here with me. But that was an event where you saw it, you heard it, people coming in the booth and telling their experience with this movie. And that's one that worked on all ages. Didn't matter, I think, what age you were at. It just was really effective. Just like you said, the stuff that plays on TV at a certain time, if you're at a certain age and that thing just gets thrust upon you, no forewarning when you clicked over to the next channel, it's just there.
You said it really is what the Mahoning was built on. It's people who have had similar formative experiences coming together and sharing that. I mean, any celebrity we have at the drive-in probably hears some variation on the same story 1,000 times. I first saw Never-Ending Story when I was blah, 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 and that made me so sad when the horse died. Or, I had a crush on you, or whatever it was. And we all, that's, if fandom is the word, that's what we thrive on, is everybody having a place that they can connect with other people who have had a similar experience. And sometimes it's not even being the same age. I mean, God, the Universal Monster weekends we do, the age range is crazy. It's little kids to the elderly, all of whom were touched by these movies at some point in their life.
Fandom has no age range. That's the beautiful thing about it. And for sure. That happens all the time. How many times has somebody come to the lot and been like, I saw the documentary, I love Mark. I'm in
Not
love
often
with
enough,
Mark.
but
I mean, all the time. It's becoming a regular thing. That's a good question. It's, again, I don't really understand why somebody would be pissed about it. What was the second half of his, or do you get upset that they what?
He said, when you encounter someone who's had the same formative moment as you, does it make you feel good you've found a kindred spirit, or bad that your personal memory isn't as unique as you thought? I guess I could see that if you were
Zach is awesome.
If you were dining out on this story for years, where it's I saw House of Wax in 3D.
So did I. What?
Damn.
Literally fist fight breaks out. You son of a bitch. Oh, that's fun. Zach's a jokester. We love Zach.
But again, these questions are so thought-provoking. I love it. That's why I throw it out to Patreon often. I'm like, give us something to talk about. And it spawns interesting stories we might not have told, or interesting discussions and things. So it doesn't always have to be a question. It can just be, what prison film in French is your favorite? And that's kind of what Carl and Daryl do with the top 5 list. It's something kind of specific to get your brain working.
Yeah. Speaking of, we did, Jeff, I don't know if you know, but we did a record with Daryl and Carl, and we did some top 5s. These guys are monsters, dude.
I'll bet that was a blast.
It was awesome, but they're so sharp and so quick, where I say it every time they come up with a topic. I'm like, let me know in advance so I can think about this. I can't. Normally they do it over breakfast and just knock it out.
And we did have several topics they gave us that we didn't get to, so we will do another. So maybe we can do one with all of us involved.
Oh, totally. It's a lot of fun, but it's pressure. It feels pressured. I got to live up to the standards of these two film aficionados, these two New York nuts.
You shall pay, Black Prince. I curse you with my name. You shall be Blackula.
Blackula, the Black Avenger, rising from his tomb to fill the night with horror. Blackula, Dracula's soul brother, deadlier even than he. Blackula, he thirsts for your blood, he hungers for your soul, more horrifying than Dracula. The Black Avenger, Blackula, an American international release, rated PG, parental guidance suggested.
So the last question we have is from fellow Mahoning family member. Mistress Seneca asks, if you could, would you want the documentary At the Drive-In, available now on DVD and streaming, to include a post-movie update to show how the Mahoning Drive-In fared after the movie was released? A lot has happened since, like to show how successful it has been and how the audience grew to save the Mahoning, little Virgie and family growing up, and what the current goings-on are. That's part two, back at the drive-in.
Yeah. Certain things, hell yeah. Certain things, hell no. But it's true. I mean, people show up and see the documentary all the time, or they'll tag us on social media and say, I saw this really great documentary, and I went to their social media and they're still open, because I think that the documentary does leave a kind of cliffhanger thing. Like, we were the underdog story, and at that time it kind of left it as, will they make it? Yeah, I don't know.
Exactly. The doc ends, it's a very upbeat ending, and it shows that we had a big show. So
that's the up.
They survived 2020.
That's right.
And there's so many different faces there now. I mean, I watched the doc or some of the clips from it and things like that. Not that I watch it all the time, but when I've watched it, even when it came out, I saw how different the place was from when it was shot a couple of years before that. The snack.
Oh, it's crazy.
The way we do things in the scheme of things is the same, but a lot of it has been added since then.
What I'd love to see is some of the deleted scene stuff. You know, like I said, the trip down to rescue the film, and I'm sure he has. I mean, we know it. He was there for a solid year.
Yeah,
he must have so much footage. Right. It's ridiculous. But when we had Al on to talk about his release of Marionette Land, his most recent film,
which is wonderful,
available now. I'm waiting for my copy.
Available on DVD, and it's a streaming rental wherever you rent digital things. I got a review copy of it, so I got it a little bit early, and it's
you son of a gun. I was wondering how you got it. It's, you got the inside connections. That's it.
I do a review show, so, and luckily I'm in really good with MVD. So
that's awesome.
Like the At the Drive-In documentary, it's the full film. It's beautifully shot. It's very human, very funny, touching. And it also has the same number, 17 minutes of deleted scenes and a commentary and a bunch of extras. I'm selling the movie for everybody right here.
Crazy.
Al listens to the documentary, so job well done. I legitimately liked it quite a bit. I wouldn't tout it if I didn't like it. I'd quietly say, oh yeah, he made another film.
It's funny because you're used to having everything kind of be in your hands right away, and it was like, it's dropping on the 8th, and I did a pre-order thing, and it's like, won't be here until Monday, the 15th. I'm like, God, I gotta wait.
Well, Mark, why don't you tease it a little bit for the people? Tell them what it's about.
Marionette Land is the story of Robert Brock, who is a man who runs the Lancaster Marionette Theater. That might not be the official name of it, but it's a marionette theater in Lancaster. And it's this little marionette puppet theater where this guy by himself creates all these puppets and puts on these somewhat elaborate shows. And the documentary was shot right before the pandemic hit. So he was planning to do the 30th anniversary of the place and do a big gala show. And he does like a drag show. So part of it is about him mounting that. And it's very intimate. It's Al and Robert's mother lives above the theater and sort of provides the funding to keep it running. So they have this nice looking apartment above the theater. And it's just this portrait of this, like the film about us. It's people who are very passionate about something very specific and who are really kind of going against the odds to try to make it work. And Al's got a great photography eye, so it looks really nice. And I don't know, Val and I watched it and we were just really thoroughly enjoyed it.
He really has a style, those who don't follow Al on the social medias. On his YouTube, he shares his shorts that he does. What's that called? The Lancaster.
Lancaster documentaries. He's done several.
Yeah.
Marionette Land, I think, grew out of one of those. That was just a short about Robert doing the puppet thing, and he does them. Some of them are just interviews with people on the street. Some of them are.
They have such heart. They're so well done, and you can really see a filmmaker's kind of fingerprint when you watch over time. And I'm really excited to see this feature length. And I know he put his whole heart into it, literally while going through the madness of trying to have his kids and all that stuff. So I'm really excited to see it, as I'm sure a lot of the Mahoning fans are.
So the question of another documentary, Al listens to this documentary. So
listens to this podcast.
Direct your queries to Manelli Films.
Yes.
I mean, obviously we would love to see we've lived it. And when you're in the middle of this sort of thing, you're just like, wow, that would have been great to be on camera, because we've had so many ups and downs every season since that thing was shot. It could be a series of films. Would it be interesting to people who don't know us? I don't know. But certainly the story is going to make a heck of a book one day, because this last season alone was insane. And, every season we hope that this is the year where we just put on shows and everything's groovy and calm, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we're friends with Al, and even when the madness of the 2021 season was all happening, I reached out to him. I was like, is this something you're contemplating, the idea of, a potential sequel or something like that? And he's working on his own career and his own kind of trajectory, but I made sure to let him know, I'm like, look, I'm trying to film and record as much as I can, because it's amazing material. If he ever wanted, or whoever wanted to do a continuation story of where the legend has gone. Because sometimes people come in and they're totally blind. They saw the documentary and they decide to visit, and they see everything that's going on, and they're like, oh my God, this has become like a serious cult following here, which is really great. It's much better than them searching for us and not being able to find us, or being like, oh, well, they closed the year after that documentary was made.
Yeah, exactly.
From day one, I've always joked with Al, it's like you have the trilogy. You have At the Drive-In, you have Back at the Drive-In, and you have Always at the Drive-In.
That's perfect.
That's perfect.
Great. Yeah. Us literally like in rocking chairs and stuff. We're always here.
Yeah. That will be the last one in the series, called The Show Is Over.
But such great memories with it. And we talk about it all the time. Whenever I go onto any streaming site and start watching movies, inevitably it will recommend to me, hey, you'd probably like this little film called At the Drive-In. It's so readily available. It's amazing. I don't know if that's Al's specific work or that's an MVD thing, but the availability of this thing is great. And people reach out regularly, not just family members, but just people all over the place, and saying like, I saw that documentary streaming on so-and-so,
Oh yeah. I mean, it is rare that in the off season, a month, but during the season, almost not a week goes by where we don't get a message from somebody saying they just saw it. They hope everything is going well. They want to visit us one day. They're from all corners of the country, if not world. And it pops up because of the kind of movies I watch on Amazon and such. It does pop up, and it's like, you might like this, and the picture is me. Like,
I know, it's great. I know that, dude.
That's weird.
And it's great. It's great that that's still happening, because this thing is several years old now.
Oh yeah. Going back, he did the majority of the shooting during 2016.
Yeah,
which is that just seems crazy,
Yeah.
How far we've come since then. But it's really it's a great piece, and I'll say it that we'll be talking about it till the day we die. But it's forever our calling card, because he was so perfectly able to capture the heart that the Mahoning is. And there's elements in the movie that we weren't fully leaning into yet, like the James doing the costumes and some of the merch items and things like that. And to see that we were able to kind of take that and build the business around an untested model is it's pretty cool. And I think it's inspiring for people that may be dreaming big. I think that's what this movie, more than anything, is it's a dream big movie, you know.
Absolutely.
If you dream big, you make it big, you know.
And if anybody hasn't listened to the podcast episode of this podcast that we did with Al recently, it's episode 35. So wherever you listen to this podcast, they'll all be there somewhere. And we spent about an hour with Al talking about At the Drive-In documentary and Marionette Land and just the production aspects of all this. And it's a really fun chat. So I don't presume that everybody listens to every episode. It'd be nice if you did, but if you don't, that episode is there for you.
And Mark's been doing a bang up job with lining up the calendar with guests as we're moving into the season. We know it. We're going to get swept up in the production tornado of it all. And it's going to be great to have a lot of these backlogged episodes. And what Mark was telling me before, that these are timeless episodes. When we do a calendar review episode, it's hard to go back and listen to that maybe later. It's kind of time stamped, but when you're talking to, you know, somebody who is in the industry or somebody who is part of the drive-in culture or part of the fabric, that's something you can go back to on an informational level always. And that's really cool for the drive-in to be able to offer that.
Mention who we talked to a little while ago.
We had the mind-blowing experience of talking to, I mean, I'd say he's Mahoning royalty. It was kind of weird because Mark was nervous before the interview, but we had the CEO and president of Rico's Nachos on for a very short interview, but he was amazing. And it's funny because in talking to him, our model and their model kind of cross over in that they keep all of their kind of merchandising and publicity super rooted in its past and super rooted in nostalgia. And the fact that they still use Rico and Pepe and, you know, the characters that were created, like he told us, I think in the late 70s, you know? So for something like that to still be kind of the big sell of their brand is super cool. And he's such a cool dude. And we talked about so many things, including the infamous Rico's bumper that we play in at intermission, which, Jeff, you can say it's become legend.
It has, definitely. Or should I say, see?
It's great because at the end of the episode, I totally threw their tagline on him. It was awesome.
And that came about because, like I said, I don't know if you were on the phone yet, Virgil, but Mark was telling me about the interview. And my first two theaters after I got out of the Air Force, my first two theaters were indoor theaters, and we had no nachos. Didn't know they existed, never heard of them, just didn't have them. My third theater was my first drive-in theater. That was in Limerick, Pennsylvania. It was the Highway Drive-In.
Right.
And there we had nachos. But I knew they were Rico's nachos. Didn't know much else about it. And one day my district manager comes in and he says, "How many intermission reels do you have?" I said, 3. He said, "Put one of these on each one." And he had a box full of trailers, and it was the Rico's Nacho trailer. He said, I told him I had 3. He said, "Well, put one on each one." I said, "Okay." So I saw this band around at Rico's Nachos. Oh, okay. So they're advertising for the nachos that we sell. And I put one on each reel. Like at that time, I did only have 3, and they've been on there ever since. And this is exactly the same one that it's exactly the same one that I got in 1986 that the people are watching.
Amazing
today. Yeah,
I love that.
That's
yeah, we were showering him with love, and it was just kind of cool to I'm sure have him hear of the fandom, the cult fandom that Rico's Nachos has. But talk about a storied past. The guy is 4th generation owner of a company that started really grassroots. You know, his, I guess, great grandfather came over from Sicily, started his own grocery shop, which turned into the kind of grocer distribution chain that became Rico's. But his father, Frank, introduced concession nachos in 1976 for the very first time. His dad was the one who came up with the concept of taking the nacho chips, cheese, and the genius idea of topping them with jalapenos and serving them at the time from a cart at Arlington Stadium in 76. It's crazy. Like, you know, digging into this guy's history, I was like, what? Your dad created nachos?
Yeah.
Like, how cool is that, man? The world loves nachos. So yeah, it's a really fun episode and one that you guys for sure will love. And again, a timeless one. We're all about representing again our beloved drive-in culture, and talk about someone that's a part of the fabric. This is a guy that's been the main distributor in every single movie theater since, he said, I think 78 is when they did their big contract with at the time United Artists, which became Rio. Yeah. Think about that. If you've had a nacho in your childhood, you've had Rico's. It's kind of crazy to. I didn't want to gush too much, but I was like, it is almost like having the CEO of Apple or like a huge brand, because he's, in our world, he's like the biggest product ever.
I don't know not everybody who listens to this podcast necessarily comes to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater in Lehighton, Pennsylvania, www.mahoningdit.com. But we show, as we say, this original snack bar ad from the it's got to be from around 1980, because there's a prom night poster on the wall in the snack bar that you see in that trailer.
Well, we know when Jeff got it. Yeah.
86 is when he handed them out.
We run that as our intermission reel, and people love it. It's got this little animated sequence. You can find it on YouTube, and people scream Rico when it plays.
Word for word.
People post memes and all kinds of things online on social media, and they tag us with photos of Ricos. And we send those to anybody who listens. We do send these all to Ricos, and they love it. For whatever reason, and we told Tony this, Ricos and the Mahoning are synonymous in so many people's minds that it's wonderful. It's wonderful to be associated with them, and it's hilarious the way people, associate together. So it was a really fun talk.
How cool is that for a guy who's running, his family's company in Texas, to have this East Coast fandom brewing? And it's like, when we sent him the picture of the fan who showed up with Rico tattooed on his body, I mean, he told us that went around the whole entire company. It's like, we showed that to everybody. I showed that to my grandmother.
It's amazing.
Yeah, the fandom, it runs deep. That's for sure. We take our fandom very seriously, as you can see.
Yeah.
So as the weeks go on, you will see us or hear us having the occasional guest on the show. That's not just the three of us or a staff member. People who are involved in the film industry, people who are involved in the theater industry, people who have been in movies, people who have made movies, people who love drive-ins, and it'll always be connected with retro film and drive-in in some way. But we've got a good number of people. We've recorded several, actually. I was joking with Jeff earlier. This is Celebrity Week as far as recording the podcast goes, because we're 2 down, 1 to go with people I'm talking to this week. And then we've got 4 or 5 waiting in the wings to schedule. So we can say we're going to talk to Rob Mack, the president of Filmac, which is the company that did the original Let's All Go to the Lobby snack bar ad and the dancing hot dog.
Part of the fabric, right?
Yeah. Which is amazing. I talked to Stephen R. Bissett, comic artist and film historian, who's now appearing on a lot of Blu-rays, for like an hour and a half yesterday about his drive-in memories and old film distributors and stuff like that. Tomorrow, I'm talking to Pamela Pierce Barslow, who's the daughter of Charles B. Pierce, who did The Legend of Boggy Creek, and a whole bunch of stuff like that about that movie and its original distribution and the restoration and drive-ins and all that stuff. So Galena Quigley has agreed to come on. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll spread these out over the coming weeks or months, as it were.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of fun to look forward to. And like I said, Mark, you're really crushing it with truly curating this podcast. And we talked about it before we hit record about how the podcast really it's taking on a life of its own, with the arms that are growing from it, the opportunities that we're having to reach out to drive-in owners from the past and present, and really try to bring the attention to the love of the drive-in. And I think the more that we do that, the bigger and more ears it's going to hit, because that's what it's all about. It's all about getting the word out there. If somebody hears about a drive-in they didn't know about, they happen to be driving through town, like Mark said, and now it's on their radar. That's a beautiful thing. It's all about trying to support really all of our drive-ins. You know who I'd love to talk to is some of the drive-in owners over in Australia. I see pictures of, I think it's called the Autorama Drive-In.
Yeah.
It's just supreme. And I hear the culture is really strong over in Australia, and always kind of has been.
And that's an area where as far as I know, seasonally, they don't need to close, which for a lot of our country, I think aside from Southwest and West Coast, it's mostly a seasonal business for the most part.
Yes, that is, yeah, except for down south. Right.
And you know what's crazy? When we talk to the CEO of Rico's Nachos, they're in 56 countries. They're in tons of concession lobbies across the world. So who knows? Autorama, they could be running the Rico's Nachos ad for all we know.
That could be.
But yeah, lots of fun to look forward to. That is for sure. Always great getting together with you guys. Thank you to the fans for submitting your questions. Again, if you guys want to get more involved, Mark, why don't you tell them how they can jump in on the Patreon?
It is www.patreon.com/Mahoning Drive-In. And we have 3 levels of membership. It is a $4.99, a $9.99, and a $19.99. And each of those give you different levels of benefits and access to original content and perks on the lot and discounts on the lot and things like that. And the top level, the Simplex level, gets you a free monthly screening at the Mahoning when we're open on 35. In all likelihood, using the prints we've been discussing earlier in the episode today.
Yeah.
And occasionally we'll get prints from Exhumed as well. So we get them from other sources. Those are always mystery movies.
Friends, yep.
You don't know what you're getting until you get there. Those are a really good time. And then we started doing the virtual screenings in the off season, which we may still continue to do. Those all come from AGFA, American Genre Film Archive, their library of licenses. And that's once a month on Zoom. Virgil and I will do a pre-recorded DJ set like we would as though you were at the theater. I put together a digital trailer show, and then we run a movie all through Zoom, and you can sort of chat along, text chat along. And those are secret features, but they're all licensed by us through AGFA. And we've had a really good time with those too. So it's a heck of a lot of fun. It's a way to keep the fun and feel of the Mahoning going, even if you're not there. Like with the
or during the off season.
Exactly. With the in-person Simplex shows, if somebody's a Patreon member in California, they're probably not going to make it out on a Thursday night. But with the virtual shows, anybody anywhere can do it from home. So it's a lot of fun.
It's a real blast.
Yeah.
And it's been great because we do have fans who discover us from the documentary and they live in California or they live in Australia. So for them to be able to jump in, get involved, and experience a piece of the Mahoning, it's been really, really great, and something that has been personally, on a personal level, keeping me sane as far as being able to connect with our fans and our audience, which that's the hardest part of the off season. Jeff knows it, you know it, Mark. We go from ultra social, seeing our best buddies every single day and practically every day, and then it just goes to like nobody,
for 6 months.
So it's really strange, and you would think after doing it for so long you'd get used to it, but still I get those off-season blues every single off-season, kind of just missing it.
But I've talked about this before, but that's what it has to be, because if we did it year-round like some do down south, it just wouldn't have this same texture to it, this same flavor. If you didn't miss the people, if you knew you were going to see them year in, year out, every week, every day, it just would blend into the ordinary. But the fact that we have to take 6 months off because of the weather makes you Jones for it that much more.
Yeah, and I think that works on an audience level too. I mean, we know people, they really, really are waiting those couple months before we start announcing shows, and once they start seeing it, it's like Groundhog Day, Schmoundhog Day. When I see announcements coming, I know spring is ahead. So
exactly, and we are selling tickets for some of our early shows already.
Yeah, that's very key to let everybody know. If you're a fan, you want to make the trip out, we've started announcing our April and May calendar. You can find tickets at mahoningdit.com, like drive-in theater. And of course, support us any way that you guys can. Support the drive-in any way that you guys can. Wear the love of the drive-in on your sleeve.
As you leave the theater, folks, please be careful. Don't let this happen to your car. Be sure to remove the speaker before you leave. If you should accidentally pull a speaker loose, please turn it in at our snack bar or box office. Thank you.
All right, this has been great, guys. I think on that note, Jeff, take it away, my friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for coming out tonight to the Mahoning Drive-In Theater. We hope you'll come back and see us again real soon. The exit is on the right-hand side of the screen at the front of the field, and most importantly, have a very safe trip home. Good night, and God bless you.